Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Hertfordshire County Council's Employment Committee. I'm David Williams and I'm the chairman of this meeting and leader of the County Council. I'm joined at the meeting by Teresa Heritage, the deputy chair of this committee and also the deputy leader of the County Council, by Nigel Bell, who is substituting for Judy Billing as the deputy leader of the Labour group of the County Council. We're also joined by Richard Roberts, the executive member for Adult Care and Health. And we have apologies from Stephen Giles Medhurst, the leader of the Liberal Democrat group, who unfortunately is not able to join us at this time. But rest assured, colleagues, that we are quorate. Ahead of the meeting, I just want to make an announcement, namely that in relation to COVID-19 and attendance at this meeting, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the committee are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphone off once they've finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking at the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the hand raised function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. So, turning to the part 1 agenda, and the first item on the agenda are the minutes of the meetings held on the 23rd of October and the meeting held on the 14th of January. Colleagues will recall that the meeting on the 14th of January was specifically to undertake the appointment of a new director of adult social care. And there are both part 1 and part 2 minutes. But colleagues, can I ask you to indicate in chat whether you are for, against, or abstain in relation to confirming that the minutes are a correct record of those 2 meetings. That's confirmed, thank you. So, in relation to the second item of the agenda, public petitions, there are none. Members are reminded that all equalities implications and equalities impact assessments undertaken in relation to any matter on this agenda must be rigorously considered prior to any decision being reached on that matter. So the first substantive item on the agenda is item number 3, the salary review April 2021, chief officers, deputy and assistant directors and heads of service. And Sally Hopper, our Director of Human Resources, is going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. Please may I begin by declaring a personal interest that as an Assistant Director, the report, any recommendations or decisions do affect me. So thank you for that. And then if I can then move on to the report context and jump straight to number 4, where we give the context in which this report is written, which is that every year we do review the staff in the subject heading salary, and this year is no exception. And it's looking at whether what decisions the committee wants to make around any financial reward relating to that salary review. So you can see that in paragraph 5, it looks back and it reminds the committee what last year's award was, both in terms of the percentage addition and in terms of what's known as an exceed payment if one exceeds their appraisal. And that being so, it then brings us to think through what we would like to do for this year. And in doing so, in paragraph 6 of the report, we have paid attention to the external context. And it's with that external context that we lead to the recommendation, which is set out in number 3 of the report, which is that the recommendation put to Employment Committee today is that there will be no consolidated cost of living increase for the year 21 and 22, and that will only be reviewed if the National Joint Council review their percentage, and that will be something that we can't determine at this stage. But for now, we are recommending no consolidated cost of living increase. And then in item number 3B, we are recommending that if a member of this community does exceed, which means that they've done really well in the performance year and exceeded their objectives and gets an exceed rating under the performance appraisal system, ordinarily they may be able to attract a financial reward. But the report is saying that whilst one can still exceed, there will be no financial payment for such an outcome. And that concludes the recommendations contained within the report for your consideration.
Sally, thank you for that. Colleagues, can I ask if there are any comments or questions in relation to the report? Nigel, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just say that I agree with the recommendations. They're eminently sensible considering the time that we're in, and I'm not going to go into any great detail on that. I think that it's something that could be, obviously, it would be reviewed if the national committee was going to come in and with any other awards, but we don't know what they're going to do. But I think, I certainly agree with the recommendations, and our group does on this. Can't disagree because of the situation we're in. I'm sure that could be reviewed. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Richard.
Yes, a couple of things. I think I fully agree with the recommendation and would support that. The one thing I picked up from the comparative data was that the PMA grades appears to be slipping behind comparator benchmark. Not that I'm expecting to do anything in this report, but just to flag that I note that. And that would be the grade just below most senior officers and therefore below director level. And therefore we might want to reflect whether that is a sufficient incentive to keep our very best and brightest, or to attract the very best and brightest to Hertfordshire. So that was all on that one. And in terms of, I think you set it out nicely in the report. Thank you, Sally. The private sector is averaging at about a 1% pay increase at the moment. And who knows, coming further into this year, that might even drop further. And therefore, at this juncture, we should not be anticipating the kind of increases that we had into 2021, which was 2.75%. I don't think we should expect that for the following year, even from the NJC. So with that said, I fully support the report and thank you for writing it.
So thank you, Richard. Yes, and I think it is important to recognise that the background to this is that the Chancellor of the Exchequer will, as you'll be aware, highlighted the importance of restraint being exercised in the public sector when it comes to public sector pay awards. And the contrast is often drawn with the amount of insecurity that currently exists in the employment market in the private sector. And so I think that is a factor here behind the view that senior management have taken, that the right thing to be doing for Hertfordshire County Council at the moment is to pursue these two issues, namely the pay restraint, but also that for those that warrant an exceed rating, that the payment for an exceed rating will not be made, but importantly, it will be recorded as part of somebody's staff record. So on that basis, therefore, the recommendation that we have got before us on the order paper, can I ask you to, again, in chat, please, indicate whether you are for, against, or abstaining? So that's unanimously supported. So thank you for that, colleagues. So we then move on to the next item on the agenda, and in many respects the same principles apply, but this relates specifically to the Chief Executive. And Sally, can I just ask you to make some comments on the report?
Yes, so thank you. So under the Constitution, it is important that we keep the Chief Executive pay review separate, and this is what this report seeks to achieve. But the recommendations mirror what I've just updated the committee on item 3. So providing you're content that those recommendations can apply to the Chief Executive as well, there's no further additions to this report. Thank you.
So colleagues, I think that's pretty straightforward. The recommendations, both in terms of the cost of living increase and in terms of an exceed rating, apply as before. You'll note in the report that for last year, the Chief Executive did secure an exceed rating, but he chose not to take the payment associated with that. That's something I just wanted to highlight that was obviously in the report. So colleagues, as in terms of then what's on the order paper, can I ask you to indicate whether you're for, against or abstaining? Thank you, that's agreed unanimously. So, agenda item number 5 on the order paper. Sally, can you introduce this, please? This is the pay policy,
of course.
Statutory requirement for us to publish a pay policy for 2020-21.
Thank you. So that is responding to our requirement under the Localism Act 2011 to display this policy every year. And can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, it's slightly frozen. So thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And this requires us to publish the pay policy, and ordinarily not so much changes from one year to the next. But this year I wanted to draw the committee's attention to there is an addition that's highlighted. So hopefully that's helpful for you in seeing where the policy has changed. And the policy variation is simply to address the 95k cap, which came in November 2020. And this is a piece of legislation that restricts the public sector awarding a payment that exceeds £95,000 to any one individual. So it does put some restrictions on that happening. And that's all set out in 9.1 onwards. And then if there was to be any incident where we were thinking that we would go beyond the 95k cap, this policy allows for us to make it very clear that we haven't got delegated authority to do that as officers. That needs to come before full council, and that's set out in 9.2.4. So it really is just to bring to the committee's attention today that the pay policy hasn't changed other than the 95k cap, and the committee are asked to note those updates in response to that change of legislation and to agree the policy as it stands. Thank you.
And Sally, I've just realised, and I should have raised it before, that the heading for this item on our order paper and indeed on the report, which is on ModGov, is the pay policy 2020-21, when in fact
okay.
this is the pay policy for 21-22.
Correct. So
Yeah.
yes, let's make sure we note that in the minutes that we. So I do apologise for any confusion, but yes, for the avoidance of any doubt, it's looking ahead to 2021-22.
Yeah, thanks for that. So as Sally highlighted, the items in relation to the exit payments and the £95,000 cap are highlighted in Appendix 1, which supports this report. Colleagues, is there anything else that you want to raise in relation to this matter, or any questions that you've got for Sally? Nigel, do you want to come in? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for Sally's report. Yeah, obviously important that we've got that report on the 95,000 pay gap. and that would have to come here. And obviously, it's always important anyway. We all appreciate. Obviously, this has to come now by law to every council every year, and we've had this at district councils as well. And there will be some who might want to question the gap. But I have seen in there the fact that there seem to be less officers at county with, say over 100,000, or if one compares the gap, there is an argument that people can have about how the comparisons are drawn up. But I think the whole point is it should always be there for us to be careful about and to review the differences. And if it does look as if we're getting the balance is changing, then we do need to review it. But at the moment, I'm happy with it at the moment anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, did you want to come in?
I suppose a couple of things really. Actually, I was just worried about you being partially frozen, which I thought meant you must be melting, and I was slightly worried about that. But that aside, what I was pleased with to see was that the ratio between the lowest and the highest pay, those at the bottom, and the chief executive is 6.6, 1 to 6.6, which I think compared with the private sector is very, very reasonable indeed. And I would hope that our residents would accept that we don't overpay our chief exec, but equally I hope it's reflected that we look after those who are at the bottom of the pay scale as well. And I think that was about it. Other than the care cadets, I've been hugely supportive of care cadets because they are our apprentices that have the opportunity to come forward into both either children or adult social care. And for us to offer that apprenticeship programme is something that I value. And I think I appreciate that it's noted here that it is as an exception to our pay, but actually it does give them the opportunity that otherwise might be missing. So thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And you just froze for a second then as well. So clearly the broadband conditions in Sarat are as poor as they are, as questionable as they are.
They're not fibrous around here at all.
Okay, yeah, and I mean to some of the points that have been made about the comparison with other authorities across this series of reports. One of the things I do take away is that, our chief executive's pay compares very favourably with the peers that were included in the report. We're still to see the gender pay gap analysis, but historically we haven't had a female pay gap disparity. It's been quite the opposite. Our pay has favoured our female employees compared with our male employees. But anyway, that's still to be published. So yes, one of the takeaways is that I'm very comfortable in terms of how our pay arrangements are structured at the moment. So we are asked to consider this as something that will be recommended to the County Council at the meeting of the County Council on the 23rd. And so therefore the proposal at 5.1 on the order paper is that Employment Committee recommends to County Council that the County Council adopts the pay policy for 2021-22 as set out in Appendix 1 of the report, and that Employment Committee notes the data release, including the County Council's gender pay gap information, will be expected later this year from April 2021. And that information is set out in the report. So, colleagues, can I ask you again in chat to indicate for, against, or abstain? So that is agreed unanimously. So thank you again, colleagues. And so we come to the final item on the agenda item number 6, the request for approval of temporary extension of the re-engagement of Assistant Chief Fire Officer Gus Cuthbert. Sally, again, can I ask you to introduce this report to us?
Thank you.
Please.
So Employment Committee members will recall that we first came to you in July in response to continued response to coronavirus to ask if we could please have an extension to Gus Cuthbert's contract of employment and re-engagement of him. And at that time, we asked for an extension for 6 months, and we were rather confident that that was all we would need. But circumstances have been such that we are having to come back to ask for a further 6 month extension, as set out in the summary in 2.1. And this is said with the context that before we went into coronavirus, we did have a campaign, but we were unsuccessful in attracting candidates, and therefore it seemed to be the wise decision at that time. So we are asking if we please may have another extension of up to 6 months, including the individual's notice period. But during that time, for us to work jolly hard to find a replacement. So that really is important that we brought this to you today to get that extension, but also at the same time to give you that assurance that we will be going out to find a replacement.
Yeah, I mean, as part of this background, I think it is important to recognise that Gus has led on the strategic coordination group on behalf of the Fire and Rescue Service, which is obviously a slightly different role and responsibility from the Chief Fire Officer, who actually chairs that. And then he's also served on he also serves on a regional strategic coordination body as well. And I think it's probably also appropriate, although it's not covered in the report, but we all now are aware that the Chief Fire Officer himself is due to retire later in the year. And so I think all of those factors coming together means that it's eminently sensible that we make this arrangement and extend the date for Gus's retirement through to I think it's later in July, I think, is it? Yeah, I think it is in July, 6 months anyway.
Yes.
Beyond the 17th of February. So, and yes, your assurances, Sally, that we will now have another go at progressing a recruitment in order to secure a replacement for Gus will be quite important now that we've progressed that. Nigel, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Sally. I know you did reply. I didn't see it till not long ago, but for your reply to my earlier email about this, and I'm now much more inclined to support situation. I know there's fantastic work that Gus has been doing, but that obviously I had looked at just the history on this, and I was wary of giving another 6 months, and I realise, as you've just said, that because of his retirement, it would really have to be the 3 months notice for him leaving, and that's. But what your reassurance in the email back a little while ago, saying that you and Dow would be really trying to push this on now, and it would, and I say, and it would be good if the Employment Committee, I may not be on it the next time, but if the Employment Committee was actually given an update maybe in the next month or whatever, or not month, but whenever you can, as to how you're getting on with that, just to let people know. But other than that, I'm pleased with the reassurance that you've given on this, and I'd support it now. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Any comments from any other colleagues? If not, can I ask you therefore to consider the recommendation at 6.1 on the order paper, namely that the Employment Committee approve the further temporary re-engagement of Assistant Chief Fire Officer Gus Cuthbert from 17th February 21 for a period of not more than 6 months, including any notice period. So for, against, or abstain. And that's unanimous. And that was the final item of business. So thank you for your participation this afternoon. Richard.
I don't wish to prolong the meeting, but I just wanted to say thank you, perhaps from us in the Employment Committee, about just how hard some of our employees are working at the moment, particularly at the front end, but even just working from home, doing jobs which don't attract perhaps the the praise because they're not frontline, but just as hard working from home and delivering our services and delivering them well. And this place is probably as good as any to recognise that. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you for mentioning and raising that, Richard. And yes, thank you, Nigel, for supporting it.
I agree on that as well.
Yeah, undoubtedly, you know, right across the piece, from chief officers down through to many of our staff working at the front line, they have been putting in an astonishing effort and making a huge contribution to the safety of Hertfordshire and its residents. And this is going to go on. You know, we're thinking increasingly about recovering from where we are at the moment, and it's going to involve a tremendous effort right across the authority. And I'm enormously proud of the contribution that we've been making to the county, and particularly, obviously, to our residents. So thank you for that. And so let's conclude our business and have a very good weekend, everybody, and see you again soon. Thanks, Nigel, for stepping up for this.